Hi everyone, Darren Hunter here. I'm with Michael Sanz. This is the Outsourced PM podcast show where we're showing you how a virtual assistant is a really good solution, particularly today in the looming property manager staffing crisis where it's just so hard to get quality people on the ground. Now, Michael is a virtual assistant expert. Up to 80% of property management tasks, Michael, you were successfully able to place with virtual assistants. And guys, if you want a list of up to 30 tasks, the things that Michael successfully outsourced, just go to teamsbydesigntasks.com. But Michael, today, what we're talking about is, okay, you've had someone contact you. We want to get a virtual assistant. They've signed the Teams by Design agreement. Now, we talked in the last podcast episode of the things that the office has to get proactively ready with a visual procedure manual. We talked about screen recording, all of those sort of things. So when the day one that the virtual assistant starts, they're not going to be left floundering, which is a real problem. And we covered that in the last podcast. But okay, let's just say that the office has got their visual procedures manual ready, all of those sort of things. But once a person has been confirmed with the agency, you've got a virtual assistant that's been matched to the agency after the interviews and after doing a Zoom interview with the client. What happens now? Because there is a period of time where there's going to be training and they haven't started with the office. What is this training process that you're going to put this virtual assistant through?
So I guess we need to get them prepared for everything. And we need to give them a broad understanding of what it's like in real estate. And there's, as you know, so many facets to it. There's customer service, relationships, there's understanding property management, there's dealing with different levels of stress, dealing with different types of clients, because you have the really nice clients and the really aggressive landlords and so on. So they go through about 7 to 10 days of intense training. Right, they have access to IGT training. They have access to the IGT portal, and we give them a whole series on that portal to go through and watch. So, Darren, your time management, your stress burnout.
Let me just jump in, everyone. There's over 30 hours of property management nuts and bolts training in there, which any property manager can get access to. But we're talking time management, task management, effective communication. Effective conflict, to avoid conflict proactively, how to deal with conflict when it does happen. We've even got the warning signs of illicit drug production in rental properties as well. It goes really deep. Inspections, everything, working with tradies. So really good to hear, Michael, that the virtual assistants are being that it is an obligation for them to go and watch all of that training. I mean, not even average property managers got access to the membership are actually watching all of it.
Yeah, well, definitely it's a compulsory side to the training. It's compulsory to make sure that they go through and they start watching IGT. And then we have other dedicated property management training. So we have our IGT, we have other real estate property management training, which also covers things like lease renewals, leases, arrears, leasing, documents, phone calls, things like that. And they've got to watch another series of that to get an understanding of it, the property management. So when they start, they're probably above a junior, below a senior as far as understanding, but they just don't have practical knowledge yet, right? Another class course that we put them through is an online phone handling. Now, a lot of the people that we recruit, they've got experience on the phone. They've got good phone mannerism, but we still put them through refresher courses. And just bear in mind too, Darren, yes, we have this training that we start them with. That's not where it ends. Our expectation is that throughout the life of the relationship with us, that they are still doing continual professional development. Right? This is just the start. So we get them to do this phone training. In addition to that, we also, Dennis and I, we did a recording on slang, Aussie slang, British slang, Kiwi slang.
Can we just go back a bit here to this phone calls? Let's talk about the phone calls. And you also talked before about phone call simulator. What let's pull that apart just before we move on to the slang stuff.
So, as you know, we've probably done, over 500,000 phone calls. We have a lot of good call data and recording of calls. So we put our team members through call simulations, and we have scenarios, and we give them the scenario, and then they get calls, and they have to take the call, and we watch their response, how they would engage on that phone call, what they would say using the information that they've got. From those calls, our QA actually says, Darren, good call, bad call. This is what you could have done differently. This is what we expect on the phone call. And it could be things like maintenance. It could be things like leasing. In fact, I listened to one of the calls the other day, and our QA was really abrupt. They were the tenant wanting to view a property, and they rang and they were kind of, yeah, hi, I've only got 1 minute on this phone call, and I'm trying to find this property that I can have a look at. It's 1 Smith Street, and I can't find it. The property manager's not calling me back. What's happening? And that was the first call of this new recruit.
Michael, let's just stop there. You said the QA. Teams by Design has actually employed somebody as the QA person, correct?
Yeah, full-time QA.
So this new virtual assistant is now getting a call in a call simulator from a real person who's actually the quality controller with Teams by Design.
Correct. So we have someone that listens to every single phone call that we make and receive. We have a couple of people that actually make up that team. And we listen, did they handle that call well? What was the empathy like, the sympathy like? Were they able to resolve the query? It's important to us that our team aren't glorified message takers. We want anyone who answers the phone to solve the question, as you would expect a property manager would. So we give them a whole series of live recordings to listen to, and then we do the call simulation with them on a whole range of different topics, and not to trick them, but to just kind of show them what to expect, so that when they do take your phone calls, they have an idea. They're not totally in the dark, and they're good. We put them on the spot. So those phone calls are a great initiative. And you know what, Darren, that wasn't my idea. That was the team's idea. Like the team, our team itself, they're a world unto itself. They implement other training strategies that I haven't even given them instructions to roll out. This is how proactive and how great they are. Because you've got to remember too, Darren, we have a full-time human resource team, and they advertise, they interview, they check all the attention to detail, the resumes, they check all the computer specs, they go through, as well as the quality assurance, right? So if you were going to go direct and that conversation for another day, you go direct, you go into one of the platforms and you find someone, I guarantee you're not checking what their call quality is like. I guarantee you're not checking all their specs. You're taking them at face value more often than not. And that's a whole other conversation.
What I like, Michael, is that you've got, so many virtual assistants that you've got currently working for you, that have previously worked for you. Every one of the phone calls have been recorded, whoever they've spoken to, and you've got a massive bank of phone calls, good, bad, otherwise, that this person is exposed to as part of their training. There's no office that could brag that this is what your Teams by Design people are exposed to before they actually start working with an office. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and you're right there too. Like any bad calls, we have a series of bad phone calls that we let the assistant listen to, because we want them to know what our expectation is of what a call is. We think it's a bad phone call. And it could be that the other person was aggressive, they didn't handle it well, they got stressed, they didn't know how, the narrative or the language to use. And it just helps us too. Like when we can pull up all these old phone calls and listen to them. Again, it's not to chastise anyone, but we need to know these things so that we can make sure your team member is growing with you and they understand the calls. We had a phone call the other week where there was a landlord for a company, and they were just rude. They were rude, and they'd been trying to speak to a property manager who had been ignoring them for a while in an office, and the assistant got the brunt of that. Right? They took it. But they handled the call with such finesse, didn't get upset, didn't get angry. And that's what you get from training and good call handling, that they didn't escalate it. No, it wasn't a fiery exchange. It was, no problem. I'll get Darren to give you a call. He's currently in a meeting, but I'll make sure that he calls you back, and then they would call the office, make sure that person, when they're ready, could call. They'd call the landlord and say, yep, I've been able to speak with Darren. He's going to give you a call in the next 30 minutes. I'll give you a call in an hour to make sure that you've touched base. And, like officers don't give that training. Darren, officers don't give the time of day to their physical staff. They expect them to know how to answer it. They say, here's how you answer the phone, and then good luck.
Here's your desk, here's your phone, good luck, you're on your own.
Yeah.
That's the normal. And all right, let's move on. That's really good. So we've covered everyone. There's a nuts and bolts training that property managers are actually exposed to. The VAs also have to learn the same stuff. All righty. So they're exposed to all this really good level property management nuts and bolts training. Then they go through phone simulators and learn phone simulation the hard way and the right way. So when they start with you, they know how to take an inquiry, and they're going to be probably better trained than a lot of people that are going to start at your own office. So I think that's awesome. Next, Michael, let's get back to slang and property management culture. Let's talk about the culture of Australia, New Zealand offices, and of course UK. Let's talk about language and culture there.
Language is important, and I guess in different locations, different regions, they have different vernaculars. I find I'm from Victoria, from Melbourne. I think Melbourne's the best. I find that the more north or the more west that you go, the accent is a bit more drawn out. Dennis says the word "but" at the end of every sentence.
Go on.
And it's more relaxed, and so it's understanding. I would say prima as a fruit box, as some people call it, a box drink. So different wordings. So Dennis and I went and did recordings on slang language across Australia and New Zealand and the UK. Now, we don't expect our assistants or your assistants to speak slang, but they do need to understand how we speak, that we abbreviate. As any word that we can abbreviate and shorten, we will.
Arvo instead of afternoon.
But it's also, Darren, you'd be surprised at how many Australians and Kiwis and so on write like that. And so there are emails where they've got, I'll drop it in tomorrow, Arvo. And they're like, what's Arvo? What does that mean? So we let them know. It means afternoon, university, Macca's. In the Philippines, they don't call it Macca's.
What do they call it?
Or McD.
McD, yeah. And Americans call it McD, right? Mickey D's. And it's all these changes, isn't it, and differences that you need to be aware of. And even right between Victoria and South Australia, there's differences. And can you actually pick up a South Australian accent?
Yeah, we can, but they wouldn't know that.
Well done on picking that up. But
and then going further on slang, Darren, it's also understanding what the weather is like. So you're talking about language. Could you imagine talking to someone and you're having a good banter with them, and then, it's freezing, I've got to put my jumper on. Because Melbourne goes through 4 seasons in a day, and I'm up in Queensland at the moment, so I'm kind of away from all that. But having that joke, no one abroad would really know that Melbourne goes through 4 seasons, and it could be 35 degrees during the day and 10 degrees at night.
Adelaide's the same, but it is Adelaide and Melbourne that has those 4 seasons in a day, in a week. That's just my normal. But you're right. You go to places like Queensland, New South Wales, Perth, they don't have that. It is a lot different.
And then you look at countries like the UK, and whilst there is differing weather between north and south, it's not as vast. So Australia, you're talking to someone in Victoria as opposed to someone up in North Queensland, like Townsville. That conversation is different, Darren. It's going to go differently. Different style. They're more relaxed up north as opposed to Melbourne. So we give training and guidance around that, and that sounds stupid and crazy, but officers don't do that. It's demographics also. So the type of people that you would typically be speaking with is really important. Right, there might be lower socioeconomic places, lower cost housing, which means you're going to have more calls, more calls that are kind of harder to handle. And Darren, most officers can't handle those calls.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Let's talk about the next thing that you put them through. So we've talked about the PM nuts and bolts, the phone simulators and the phone calls, being exposed to the phone calls and being put on the spot with the QA person from Teams by Design. And then you got slang and culture. The next one is location learning. Tell us about what you do there.
Yeah, I think it's really important that your assistant should know like where your office is, the streets that your properties are on, because their idea and understanding of property would be totally different to yours. Darren, I used to think that, we used to watch a lot of American movies and TV shows growing up, and they'd have, the big stretch of green lawn at the front, or maybe a white picket fence, and these really nice houses. And I thought they were movie sets. And in fact, when I went to America and I saw that houses were actually like that, growing up in Australia, you think all homes have to be kind of like this, and that must be a movie set because they're so well manicured. We have different expectations. When I got to America and I saw, hang on, houses are like that. There are nice streets that do look like that. Makes you think that someone living in the Philippines or someone abroad, they may have a different thought process of what the houses are that people are moving into. Give them examples. Do Google Street Map, walk them through the area. Here are some of the houses. Darren, you made a good suggestion. Give them a list of properties and get them to go look it up on Google and do a bit of research so you can see what are the houses like.
They got photos of the inside. If you got a virtual tour, that's even better. If you got video of the inside's even better. But you got lots and lots of photos. You got property marketing photos they can have a look at. But on Google Maps, even on Google Earth, you can then have a look at the outside. You can have a look at the street. You can have a real experience with the 3D of Google Earth as well, or the Google Maps of the street, walking down the street. There's just so much experience that people can learn of your suburb, inside of properties, and of course, the streets and the overall experience of the area.
I encourage a team that if someone gives you an address, you're talking to someone about a property, Google it. Look it up while you're talking to them, see what property they're talking about so you can have an idea. It creates, and over time, it creates knowledge. So they know, just like property managers know all the properties. That said, most property managers know the properties, but not everyone in their office knows what they look like. In fact, they know not much about it. So your assistant would generally end up knowing more about the properties on your portfolio than all your property managers combined.
Absolutely.
And we don't, I guess, it's good for us to kind of verbalize and say what we do at Teams by Design. But if you're looking to recruit virtual assistants, these are the things that you really should be incorporating to making sure you're giving them that environment. Otherwise, you're giving them 5% of what they really should be knowing.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we've PM nuts and bolts, foam simulators, slang and culture. We've talked about location learning. Now, let's talk about ghosting. Your virtual assistants are now exposed to other virtual assistants in Teams by Design who are already working, several months, maybe even a year, 2 years into being a virtual assistant, and they're able to listen in on their work, see what they're doing. Let's talk about what the ghosting and coming alongside other virtual assistants in that initial induction period.
Yeah, so for us, ghosting is when a team member sits with another team member virtually, right? They're not going to sit in the other person's home, but we might be doing similar tasks for other clients, and so our new recruit, your virtual assistant, can be sitting on a Zoom session, recorded, shared screen is what I was trying to say, with the other virtual assistants, so they can watch how the tasks are done. They can listen to how some of those calls are being answered in a live setting, and they can spend a day with them, 2 days with them, 3 days with them, sharing notes while they're being trained on the job. So when they start on that particular task, whilst it's still a new task for them, they have a greater understanding of what the expectations are and what has to be done. Also, too, Darren, as each office is different, and we might be able to give some advice to another office on how they should be doing, or some changes they could add to their process, which would make it easier for them to do. And so it's important that we look at, time in motion, best practice across the country on tasks. So your virtual assistant is always kind of learning.
Absolutely. All right. Well, is there anything else, Michael, that you put the people through before they actually start day one with the new client?
Well, I guess it's really important about team motivation, team culture. I know we touched on a bit of culture before. We make sure that your virtual assistant, that your assistant has that culture with Teams by Design. So we make sure they feel like they're included, they're part of the family, they've got that added extra support. We include them in our team catch-up days. And as you know, we can now start traveling again. We've got a few booked in throughout the year. So they are motivated, not only working with you, but they're motivated to come in to a team of local people for the executive too, right? Like where they live in a particular region, we'll have a number of other team members there. So they build that bond. They love coming to work. So when they start working with you and they see your culture and how you engage with your team members and your banter, that's the other thing, Darren, is like, don't be afraid to speak naturally and your office banter. We, you, myself, Dennis, we have a type of office banter that anyone outside of that probably wouldn't understand that at all. I'm very, very dry. Darren, it took you a long time to understand, me being my dry personality and sense of humor. You can't expect an assistant to step in and know that, right? So speak as you would, say the jokes that you would, have that humor, have that conversation. So they're indoctrinated in your way of doing things. And we're here to help too.
Absolutely. Well, you see, everyone, there's so much involved. To give you confidence that taking on a virtual assistant, we don't just hire anyone and just drop them into the role. There's a lot of work that goes into it to make sure they're on their best game when they start with you. And of course, from that point, it's up to you to make sure that you're ready for your virtual assistant with all the things that they need to learn. And we've covered that in the last podcast, talking about visual procedure manuals and so forth as well. So easy to do with screen recording. You're going to have a really awesome virtual assistant experience. I couldn't think, Michael, of ever not working with virtual assistants. IGT is all virtual assistants. Teams by Design is all virtual assistants. And we get such good people that just do such a good job. We personally wouldn't want to work any other way. We do accept property management. Not all of it can be done by virtual assistants. The high end, the dollar productive, the really high end tasks need to be done by a property manager that's well connected to the property owner with that relationship there. But 80% of the other stuff can be done by virtual assistants. So everyone, this is a good podcast. Michael, what's the easiest way for people to get in contact with you?
Yeah, just go to teamsbydesign.com, contact us, and book a time in for a quick catch up, and we can see how we can help.
Yeah. And again, go to teamsbydesigntasks.com for those 30 property management tasks that you can successfully and easily outsource to a virtual assistant. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.